Hello, Jasmine.
Hi, Timothy. It's been a little minute, hasn't it?
It has. It's been now we're recording virtually. I don't have to see you at all anymore.
I
It's been a
know we're
week.
living the dream, not having to see you.
I know we both live in the borough of Hackney. Haven't seen each other in a week.
Yeah,
How have you been?
I'm not too bad. I went home this weekend because my parents are leaving the childhood home.
That's hard.
So I know, but it's like clearing out all the crap I've hoarded from days gone by, like all the
Yeah.
stuff I've taken from my sister, from my mum, all of that stuff. So I'm happy for them. I thought it'd be sad, but actually I went for one last night out in the town with the girls,
Cute.
and I was like, let's get out of here, bitches.
Clearing is good though.
The what?
Clearing your stuff is
Oh,
good.
oh my God, the amount of crap that you hoard as a kid. And like, even my parents have the downsizing. It's like the amount of stuff. I was like, why did I buy this in the first case? I had a tiny diary that was this big, Tim. It goes on a keychain.
What?
What was I writing in that? Like nothing.
Is it like love notes?
Yeah. I love you. Send it in school.
Oh. I know you. Were your parents clearing? Are they doing the Swedish death clearing?
Yes, that's what they're all about. They've read that book and they're like, if it doesn't spark joy or bring any happiness into your life, must let it go. And like, I'm holding up some toy ferret that I had aged like 10. And I'm
What a
like, but it's,
stuffed. You had a stuffed ferret as a
yeah. And I'm
toy.
like, it sparks so much joy even now. And they're like, no, get rid of it.
Yeah, and then also it's about giving things away to family before you die.
Yeah, they've done a lot of that.
Whenever I go home, I'm always like, I'm having that. I'm having that because I'm one of five, and I think I need to get in there. I need to get in there fast.
Well, that was it. I was getting first dibs on stuff, but I actually found it was a lot of like my sister having to recover stuff I've stolen and vice versa, which I think brings us really nicely on to what we're talking about today.
It does. We're going to talk about shoplifting today. Five finger
Our,
discount.
one of our, I would say, favorite topics.
Favorite things to do. We love a five finger discount.
I have to say, shoplifting is one of those things that on a long, boring day in retail, when it happens, it brings a lot of drama, a lot of entertainment,
Sparks joy.
quite frankly.
No, it doesn't. It's stressful as hell when something gets stolen from work.
That's because you were a manager. I just wash my hands of it, but you would actually have to deal with the.
It was, it's just when you notice that something has been swiped, the fear that courses through your adrenaline, courses through your veins, and you're like, fuck, something's been nicked. But really, it's not our fault, but I know that when I report it, it's going to be like, well, who was on the shop floor? Who was close to the door? Did you do a stock count this morning? And you're playing it all forward, and you're going to get the blame.
Thing is, I wouldn't even notice. I'd probably leave the store, there'd be like 10 things gone, and I would have just gone, oh, it was a good day in sales today.
That did happen at a place you and I worked. Someone was on the shop floor. Was it me that walked in and was like, God, that shop looks very empty?
Yeah, and she was just like, oh, yeah, I swear there was something there.
And then there was a clutch bag lying in the middle of the street.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, we had quite a lot of those. I have to say, I always enjoyed the mystery of the shoplifter, but for the stress of someone who was actually on the shop floor, it's by some miracle that no one took something while I was in there. Because I'm so distracted by everything anyway, but like it would always be our friends who'd have just like nipped out to put a transaction through to get
Yeah.
the PDQ and then bang.
It's always the moment when you're like, I'm going to go and get a cheeky coffee, or
Yeah.
I'm going to go and have a bite of that baguette.
Yeah, that was you a lot of the time with some President Butter.
President Butter and a baguette. I started a movement where we worked. Everyone was on it.
We all became carbaholics
We
because,
were committing carbicide on the daily.
but that was definitely a leading cause of shoplifting was us sneaking out. But actually, I think that probably the leading cause when we worked together was just the lack of staffing.
Yeah, it's often the lack of staffing. And I think when retailers are struggling, the first thing to go is store security. So then the onus is on the sales staff. And like we said last week, if I'm employed to sell, I'm not focusing on what are the customers doing on the shop floor other than the customer in front of me that I'm serving. I can't have my eyes everywhere, Jasmine.
All seeing, all being. They expect
Can't
you to
have
be
eyes in the back of my head.
omniscient, like all being everywhere around all the store. Like, they'll be like, something will get stolen. They'll be like, how did you not see it? And it's like, well, actually, I was having to go to the stock room to get something for a customer who was ready to purchase, which I presume you would want them to purchase. And then let me guess. Oh, that's when. And like we used to lock the doors, and I know there's all those sorts of things, but that's just another whole host of issues. We've had it where shoplifters have been let in by customers, and then the customers go, I let them in, and they've just taken everything.
Or stock before it's even landed on the shop floor getting nicked. I worked at this footwear store, and one of the members of staff who often helped with deliveries was unloading the deliveries in the loading bay, and then his mate was picking them up before they'd even been unboxed. Yeah, and then got busted on CCTV.
That's terrible. I have heard of ones where, like, when the stock van arrives, there are these thieves who they'll intercept it and go, oh, mate, can you bring it round the back way? And then they'll just load it into another van and drive off.
Yeah, can you bring it round to my back entrance?
Oh, all right, Tim.
But I mean, shoplifting is nothing new. Like, we've been stealing for generations to help make ends meet. Certainly, as long as I've worked in retail, shoplifting has always been a thing. You put your hand in any pocket on the shop floor, it's got about 5 tags in it. But reading the comments from our listeners on TikTok, the feeling very much, isn't it, is that shoplifting is worse than ever.
Yeah.
And customers are, quite frankly, out of control.
And I do think there are different types of shoplifters. There are people who literally, you can tell that that's the way they make money, and they're so professional. They're thieves, professional thieves. And we've had it where it doesn't matter how good you are at sussing out the shop floor. These people are trained, and they we've seen it. They use children to steal.
Often children as the diversion.
And it's a very big operation. So like, there's no chance that you're going to really catch them. And then you have the moment
a couple walk in with a baby in a buggy, I'm like, crooks. They're crooks.
You're like, leave it outside. Leave it outside.
Can you leave that kid outside? You
no prams. Get your greasy mitts off my fucking shoes. Thank you. But I think that's like, so you have those, don't you? Have the organised thieves who, like, they'll survey all the shops. They'll be there day in, day out, watching when, like, people are doing clothes. When you go to do a sale, they'll understand how the store operates, and then they'll work that way, won't they? They'll see where CCTV is. And then you just have, like, now in the cost of living crisis, opportunists.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of set the scene, I did a bit of research. So according to the Office for National Statistics, 2023 was the worst year on record for shoplifting, with more than 430,000 cases recorded.
Five-finger discount running rife.
That's an increase of more than a third from the year before, Jasmine.
Oh.
But the British Retail Consortium, the body that represents all major retail chains, reported that incidents of customer theft more than doubled from 8 million to 6. Well, I don't know why I'm laughing. To 16
Because you're one of them.
I'm not. I'm innocent. From 8 million to 16.7 million in the period between September 22 and 31st of August 2023. Losses reached 1.8 billion, up from almost a billion the year before. It's out of control.
It's a free economy now. People are just like, it's free, thank you. I don't know.
Why do you think this is happening? Obviously, the cost of living crisis is absolutely fundamental to these increases in numbers in shoplifting.
Well, you know,
But do you think that we're in a society now that has, and the retailers have played a part in this with self-service checkouts? Like, I went into Primark yesterday. Don't judge me, anyone. I know it's a shocking retailer. But like, you go into the queue, then you're doing self-service, then you have to scan your barcode to get out of the. It's like they're assuming the moment you walk into that shop that you are a shoplifter.
that's wild.
Do you think that we kind of as a society have normalized opportunistic shoplifting now?
I think that there is an element of that. I think that, well, you and I know the process, and anyone in retail will know this. Something could get taken, which is a ball ache in itself if you're on the shop floor, because it means that usually your manager will then ask you to fill out a crime report, which anyone that works as a sales assistant knows is an absolute waste of time, because unless you've got really good CCTV, they're never going to catch, or like, rare circumstances where they've stayed in the store and someone's held them. But like, as a sales assistant, you're actually like told not to approach that person. You're not supposed to like hold them or keep them captive, or there's no citizen arrests. And
So what you're saying is that it's easier than ever for
I think
people to
so. And also, I
shoplift.
think people are aware now more of what protocol is. So they'll know that they can, like, you can only actually, prosecute if they actually assault one of us, like the sales. I remember that being the line that was thrown out to us from the police, Tim, of being like, oh, well, we can't actually continue with the report unless you have any more physical evidence or anything that could really, we can get an identity. They can't do anything
They're
unless they.
only prosecuting prolific repeat offenders. And I
Exactly.
think what's really kind of fueling the numbers is kind of that petty, opportunistic shoplifter. Like, I was reading the M&S chairman called Archie Norman said it's just too easy to say it's a cost of living problem, and that the real culprits are the impatient middle classes, too entitled to suffer self-service technology. He said a lot of people go in and think, well, this didn't scan, or it's very difficult to scan these things through, and I shop here all the time. It's not my fault. I'm owed it.
I was about to say there's a very big difference between these sort of organized crime thieves that we're talking about, and then the everyday, oh, that's gone in my basket and the weight hasn't been detected. Oh,
It's
I'll leave it. And that's like the kind of thing that adds up,
it's
doesn't
the
it?
putting through the caviar as loose white onions, as I've said before.
It's those things that I think probably have really increased. And also the sort of like, I guess in stores, I guess people are annoyed at the government. I'm sure that's a part of a reason. They're annoyed at big corporations. That's always been a thing, especially when I was a student. Students often, there are loads of students that shoplift because they're just
So
like,
what?
fuck.
So in the sense that these huge corporations are tax avoiders, so in that sense, it's a victimless crime. Is
Well,
that what you're
yeah,
saying?
they think it's victimless. And my parents always said to me, like, it's never victimless, because if you're that person who's
On the
responsible
shop
for the
floor.
store that day and you're obviously then questioned and your job could be at risk if it's a serious
Yeah.
offense. I mean, it shouldn't be your fault, but often people will want to pass blame onto someone.
And let's not forget, when these incidents are happening on the shop floor and reading what our listeners are telling us, these are often traumatic experiences. We've heard of sales assistants being spat at, punched,
Oh, yeah.
verbally, physically assaulted on the shop floor. And now that stores are staffing tighter than ever, it's often, two female members of staff on the shop floor on their own dealing with these issues, reporting it to the police who are not acting. It's pretty terrifying when it's one thing for a shoplifter to walk in and, go into the fitting room, detag something, put it in their bag and walk out. But, what we're seeing more and more, particularly on TikTok, is these confrontations on the shop floor, quite
But
scary.
that's what I mean. They're brazen now because they know that there's nothing you can do. I went to the Apple store recently and I was speaking to a sales associate there, and she was wonderful. And she said she had just sold an iPhone to someone, and she'd gone to put the box of the iPhone down to pass the PDQ to the
Gone.
customer. Instantly, someone ran out with it, and she said people will come in and just rip their iPhones off the sort of security tags. They don't care because they know that really there's nothing that can be done to them. Like even the security guards are probably thinking, I'm not going to risk getting stabbed for an iPhone. Like they're just not going to. And I think that, we're not paid enough. It's not like the old days where you'd have got them in the back and, I don't know what you'd have done then, like held them in the back room and called the police. It's not, it's not worth that. It's not worth any of that for like, what for your, it's so dangerous. And like my other friend, she worked at Size, and she said someone was on the shop floor on their own, and someone came in with a knife and said, if you don't let me take these shoes, I'll stab you. And he just sort of walked back upstairs to the stock room and said to his manager, don't want to alarm
You're just
anyone.
gonna be like, go for your life.
I'd be like,
knock yourself out.
I'd also be like, let me help you there. Let me help you put those into the bag. Goodbye.
I mean, footwear stores, definitely. People are brazen. They just try on the shoes and walk out. They don't say anything. They just walk out with them. When I was at office, there was this one shoe policy. You take out one shoe for people to try, which is utterly ridiculous. People need to try on both shoes. But it was to try to prevent shoplifting, because it was, the people doing it was so brazen about it.
Yeah, and what are you going to do? Tackle them to the ground? Absolutely not.
Well, it depends how hot they are, Jasmine.
You'll be like, you'll read them their rights. Anything you do say and will say,
I'm going through some role play fantasy.
in an office store.
But I mean, going back to what you said about, this kind of the big corporations, is it a victimless crime? But when we think about it, it's the fact that it's the cost of living crisis that's fueling this like doubling of shoplifting in the last year. But supermarkets in particular, they're not passing on the drop in prices. Nothing has come down in price. Sainsbury's last year reported nearly a £300 million profit last year. For these retailers to be saying that shoplifting is a huge problem, but when all the studies are pointing to the cost of living crisis, why aren't retailers really doubling down on getting grocery prices back to pre-COVID levels? Surely that should be the mission of these retailers, to try to stem this like shoplifting crisis.
Because I think it's exactly like you said, you're getting people from demographics that probably would never have stolen having to steal now because the price of a shop is double what it ever was before. And we both know that salaries haven't increased at that rate. So like, it's the difference between feeding your 3 children the same sort of quality of food you were giving them before, or having to go and like, I don't know, practically cut down on what you're eating.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in Darlington, my dad would come home on a Saturday or a Sunday with a joint of meat from the pub. That was clearly had been shoplifted by someone. But for people, that are struggling to make ends meet, that's quite appealing. Someone walks into a pub with some like a choice cut of meat. You think that's going to feed my family tomorrow?
Yeah, brilliant.
And in that sense, I think it's very easy, and rightly so. I think if you're really struggling, to put food on the table, you go through this kind of thought process that justifies it.
For
And
sure.
I think it is quite easy to distance yourself and think no one's getting hurt in the process,
And that it's a drop in the ocean compared to the sort of profits they're making, the amount of sales they're doing.
I had responded to a comment, and the listener really pushed back on what I'd said about, I think this is fueled by the cost of living crisis. They said, no, it isn't. This is criminal gangs. And they're working up and down the country. These giant shoplifting operations. Whereas once before it would be drug trafficking across country lines. Like, why drug traffic when you can just
Go
shoplift
and take
up and down the country?
perfect. And also, I think like if you look at it's exactly the same thing as what's going on with the phone thieves all
Mm,
over London, don't we? Constantly, you see them. They're not even hiding. It's not like they're hiding in plain sight. You can spot a phone thief from a mile away. But
mm,
like that's it is this organized culture now, is because all those phones that lots of the phones being stolen, they get shipped back to China. I found out that
mm.
loads of these people who had their phones nicked would look at turning them on, like turning Find My iPhone, and it'd be like in China 2 weeks later because they're selling parts back to China. And so I think it is like there is that overarching larger issue of this.
Overarching.
That's it, need to learn. But like this I don't know, there's definitely a huge issue with organized crime, especially here in London. I mean, we worked near Sloane Street and they have a whole group chat. So lots of like shopping
Mm.
streets for people who haven't worked in retail or haven't worked on huge roads like in London. They will have group chats where they'll send in sort of people's pictures and say, watch out for this
Lots of
person.
video footage.
So much video. Like it's fascinating, isn't it, Tim? Like if I was ever bored, I would just like watch through some of these crazy videos, but it would be groups of people who you can see it's so tactical. They'll distract a sales assistant. One of them will get the sort of the guy by the door away so that someone
Mm.
can run straight in, grab product and leave. And then they'll go meet.
Yeah, where I work in West London, there's these young kids and they are prolific and they don't give a fuck. They are shoplifting in every other shop all weekend. The police haven't done anything. The WhatsApp chat across all the retailers is popping. But I just ignore. Well, I mean, obviously, I'm trying to protect the stock in my shop, but why are sales assistants on minimum wage now like heads of security?
I know.
You
Why
know,
are
we've
we here
got
to track people?
we've got Polly coming in for an 8 hour Saturday shift. Can you man the security WhatsApp? You're like, this is a lot.
Yeah, some girl who's just doing her university weekend shifts, having to like profile people as they come through the door. It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
But that's them cutting costs, and I will be the first to say it is anywhere that has a proper security team would be all over that. But the fact that then they're getting retail staff on a group chat trying to like, they're just cutting costs on the security.
Yeah, retailers, like I've said, shoplifting is nothing new. It has always plagued retailers. Are retailers that bothered that stuff is being nicked? Because if they were, they'd A, be employing additional security, B, employing additional staff. Obviously, retailers, they're not taking the retail price hit, they're taking the cost price hit. So often at the lower end of the scale, Primark, those kind of stores, if something's selling for a tenner, it probably cost under a pound. So they justify that loss, but are they thinking about the emotional toll of the shop assistants,
Well,
having to deal
yeah.
with that every day?
It's that, and they also take into account when they're buying, don't they? When they're buying the product, they'll do a percentage that they'll just presume will be taken. But I think that feels into the other part of what we were saying is this overconsumption. It's like these retailers, rather than putting the price down, would rather put more stuff into the world and just sort of like
Mm.
pollute the world with more crap, basically, just knowing that part of it's going to get stolen. Whereas actually, if you leveled out the prices and that meant that people could actually afford your products, wouldn't that be a greater service to our society?
I think what became so clear, it was a bit of a light bulb moment actually when I was in Primark yesterday. I was
Is that where
when
you
I
got your new top from? I can see the
Jasmine,
seam falling apart in the
please.
corner.
It became very clear to me that automation will take over these stores. Last week I'd mentioned about the guy that worked at Aldi. He was manning 11 self-service checkouts. Just this one guy, and I kind of queried whether that was the loss of jobs. He said, no, nobody lost their job. But that's in an established store. You know, what I saw yesterday in Primark in Hackney and what we are talking about now, whereas retailers complaining about the increases in shoplifting but not doing anything about it, it really points to the fact that actually, like you just said, they're absorbing that into their costs. They know it's happening. And Primark in Hackney could operate now on zero staff to trade. That is, obviously, you need people to stock the store. But I was like, with this new kind of kettling system, they're literally kettling the customers into these like gated systems.
What?
You have to get out, you have to scan your barcode, your self-scanning. I was like, this is the future. This is where we're heading. It's Amazon Fresh, you know?
Oh my God, yeah.
Have you been into one of those stores?
Amazon
So for our
Fresh.
listeners that aren't in London or aren't in San Francisco, there are in limited locations, but
Yeah, I think they're in the States, aren't they, as well?
tell us about Amazon Fresh.
Amazon Fresh is like, I don't know, it's some sort of, it feels like you're shoplifting because you go into the store, you sign in with your Amazon code or whatever, you scan your
Your app.
Amazon on your app, you know, and then as you're going through the store, they have these crazy pieces of surveillance that sort of watch you, and they've got you, they know exactly who you are, don't they? And as you're picking up items, they are adding it to the bill in your Amazon app. And you just walk out of the store. You don't go through any checkout. They know what you've bought because they're tracking you with all these cameras.
You don't even pay.
You don't.
It's billed
It's
straight through
billed
the
through
app.
your Amazon account, and you literally, it is the close. If I was ever a shoplifter, that's the closest experience I've ever had to it. Because I walked out going, "This is bizarre. Like I've just left a store, not paid. Like what if it doesn't work? Like what if my app didn't work?" And
You just triggered a memory of mine. When I was growing up in Somerset, there was a Safeway. Do you remember Safeway, the
yeah, they've
supermarket?
still got a few of those lying around.
I went with my dad, Richard. It was quite late to fill the petrol on the car. I must have been about 10. He filled the petrol, right? And then just got in the car. And I was like, are you not going to pay? He was like, no, I'm not. And then he just started the car and drove off. I was so panicked. I was like, you haven't paid for the petrol. 10-year-old, nervous. He was like, no, let's just drive.
What?
And then I got more and more distressed. He was like, oh no, they've introduced, you can just put your card into on the forecourt.
He had you.
It was an early, self-service, but I was like, what is this man? Do I even know this person?
Well, in America, I was with my uncle and we did a whole food shop. And then I don't know why, I guess they have like customer cards that you scan to go in. And he, like, you were supposed to check out, but he'd just completely forgotten to pay. Like, he'd put his card in the machine, hadn't typed it in, and he'd walked out with this whole shop. And anyway, his wife got a phone call from the store saying, your husband's just walked out with a whole bag of shopping and hasn't paid. But it's okay because we can charge the card on the account. But, like, what is this?
This is where we're heading. This is where we are heading. There is no doubt in my mind now.
What do you think about this? Do you think that this is leading for an untrustworthy society where we, instead of trying to combat these things, we just presume everyone's going to do it? It's like a sneaky, like everyone's just suspicious of one another, and it feels so like surveillance.
This is the shift, isn't it? We have always, I mean, it's not really true, but the UK has always been thought as quite genteel, I suppose, and that we are well-mannered. But this kind of transformation that's happening is basically we're all crooks. The assumption now is that we're all crooks, all consumers, whether that be going into a store, you see these techniques, like I was saying, scanning the barcode, or you're shopping online and the soft fraud now that happens online on a daily basis. When I was working in e-com, an example of soft fraud would be, and again, it's opportunistic. Someone saying that a package hasn't arrived, or the package has arrived, there's an item missing, which can easily happen in the packing and picking warehouse. So soft fraud is happening online. And then opportunistic shoppers in store. But I think this shift to the assumption that we're all criminals is pretty scary. And it's a bit, dystopian, really, isn't it? Like, are we heading in towards this weird dystopian high street where it's
Every
all automated and the assumption is that we're all criminals?
and that we'll all be under surveillance. I mean, it's bad enough when I go to my local Sainsbury's and I'm at the self checkout and it's got that awful video of yourself. I always look like a pasty ghost. I'm
It's
always
always the
shocked at.
worst.
So bad for my self
You know, when you
esteem.
see, I've got friends that post, like, take a picture of that and post it on Instagram. I'm like, I look like a gremlin. Like,
Literally,
how do you look good on that?
I swear it takes my features and just enhance the worst part. So like, it's this kind of like we're always being watched. No one trusts you. Everyone's just presuming. Like, where's all that like friendliness? It's the same thing we're saying about people not interacting with one another. Like, they're just people don't want to deal with people. They're like, here's the machine. Good luck. Don't steal. If you steal,
Mm,
we've got cameras all over the place. It's like,
mm. You know, it kind of comes back. There's a sociological theory called labeling theory, Howard Becker's labeling theory, and it talks about how crime is dependent very much on the social context. You know, so say, I don't know, a soldier went to war and killed someone, right?
mm,
They're a hero. If they killed someone at home, it's murder, you
yes,
know? So how social context is super important. So are we living now in a time where the social context is that
shifting.
it's shifting and that kind of shoplifting, you know, coupled with the cost of living crisis, coupled with companies that aren't paying their taxes, that really amongst us as society, again, it's a bit of that kind of us versus them,
Mm,
is, you know, amongst society, do we think, oh God, is it really a big deal? You know, if I kind of bagged an extra bottle of wine at the self-service checkout, you know, are people's views changing about that? Or do you think that,
100%.
yeah,
I 100% agree with that because I think those people that would have, I don't know, for
been
me,
horrified in the
exactly,
past?
exactly, in that, especially in the UK, you get all that those the different class systems that I think this really plays into. That is, you know, predominantly shoplifting would be associated with lower classes, and in fact, what we're seeing now, and you know, people would be judged on that, wouldn't they? But what we're seeing now is it's leaking all through every person in society. Is that because I think we feel our economy is absolutely fucked
Trashed.
and like
And
our
there's no hope for
government
the
is,
future.
yeah, the government's been a nightmare. COVID, they were lying bastards. People going having secret parties like in our government, you know, stuff like that. We don't trust those people, and therefore there's a sort of rebellion, isn't there, that's inherent. I think you get that when people feel let down and disappointed by the state that they're living in, that
Mm.
that's their way of sort of fighting back, isn't it? That's the sort of way I think people then rationalize it that way and go, well, this is the state we're living in. This is the only way I can somehow,
Mm.
like, it's, you know, being a rebellion, anti-establishment. It's all that stuff then starts playing in people's minds.
I think you raise a massively important point. When we cast our mind back not long ago about the PPE scandal, the conservative PPE scandal, where PPE contracts were being fast tracked to conservative peers. Like there was Michelle Mone, the conservative baroness, who fast tracked 200 million of PPE contracts to two companies, of which she and her family were the beneficiary. This white collar crime that has gone on for decades. You know, people, so white collar crime, you're working in senior corporate roles or government, think that they're above the law
Yes.
and are above the law, basically, are
Yeah.
getting away with this stuff. You know, when we see that playing out in the news, you know, £200 million of taxpayers' money, and then you're at the checkout,
And you want that extra bottle of wine.
or you need to feed the kids, you're like,
Exactly.
so what it inadvertently is doing, you know, the corruption that we saw within government, particularly over the last 13 years. You can tell that I didn't vote Tory, right? is they have inadvertently normalized criminality within
Yeah.
society. It's okay for us, so then we're like, all right, well, if it's okay for you, you know,
Yeah.
it
And
must be okay.
a few extra white loose onions for me and the family, then that'll help us. That's what you
Precisely.
think.
I mean, the PPE scandal, for anyone that's listening internationally, was just really abhorrent. And I think it really kind of showed the British public that our enemy was in our own government. People were having such a tough time financially, and to see our money being squandered like that was pretty horrifying, wasn't it?
It is, it's sickening. And I think, like, there's a lack of, there's more division now than ever. And it's the whole point we made last episode about people not interacting with one another. We've totally been divided as a country, and it is us against them. And sometimes you can feel so actionless, and you don't know how to, somehow you have all these people benefiting from these rules they're making and seem to just have it so much easier at the top, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
us at the bottom, there's no shortcuts, there are no loopholes for people who are actually out there
Yeah, this
working
is
and dealing it with the shit that they're giving us.
obviously you and I are not condoning shoplifting in any way, but this is a short loophole, isn't it? To, like, how do I keep my head above water? And also,
Yeah.
not just that, with social media and the pressure now on young people to conform in terms of, like, particularly the way that they look, what they wear. That's a huge amount of pressure. I think that might fuel some shoplifting too. This, like you spoke last week about, this kind of orchestrated, edited life that
Life.
people are living on social media.
But
That's an
that, yeah,
expensive life, isn't it?
that's what I
If
was
you're
thinking.
going to bring that to reality, I mean, you're going to need, you know, a
Way more
hefty
money than
credit
we've
limit.
got. And I think that's the thing as well. There's all this pressure. It's not even just fashion, because obviously fashion is a beast in itself, and that's the pressure from that. It's things like fucking dinner parties. I'm seeing every 5 seconds on TikTok someone's hosting some beautiful dinner party at their flat, and they've got the whole shebang, and they're like, "Look at me spending the night with my friends. They've got fresh flowers." The pressure for that kind of stuff, when you can't afford that, like, you shouldn't be feeling the need to have to live up to these people who are getting paid by social media to do it, getting loads of money for that.
It's grotesque now. These
And it's
overt expressions of wealth are becoming pretty grotesque,
like
aren't they?
people constantly, oh, look at my new stuff this week, like unboxing with me, look at some more stuff. And lots of these people are getting it gifted, and then when you're sat there earning next to nothing, you think, oh, that
And
would
you want
cheer
to
me up.
emulate. And you want to
Yeah.
emulate that lifestyle.
And there's a feeling
And
I
you're in a department store and you're trying something on in the fitting room. Do you think that's happening?
And also, if you work in retail, often if you're in a department store, you have easy access to it. And when you've had it, I don't know what it's like, but when you're working hours and hours on end, you want that dopamine hit of buying yourself something. I mean, God, how many times would you go on Mr. Porter and treat yourself to something, not because you could afford it,
Stop
but
outing
because,
me, Jasmine. Never.
no, but it's true. Like, not because I've done it too, like skincare and stuff that I've been influenced to buy. It's not because I could afford it. It's because when life feels hard and you're working and grafting so much harder than these people that you're seeing online, you feel, I deserve it. You tell yourself you deserve it.
I think as well, with retail staff stealing from the stores that they work at, do you think that this is also playing into, like, you're paying me minimum wage, there are zero perks, I'm working overtime for free, my boss is a fucking nightmare, I'm just going to pocket this on the way out. I remember, this is years and years ago, knew of someone who worked at All Saints. Remember those studded
I
belts that were like,
love those that say like Jesus. I love Jesus. That
yeah.
stuff.
So what he was doing was he was going to the stock room and then he was wrapping them around, pulling his trousers down, wrapping them around his leg, pulling his trousers up. So when they did a bag search on the way out, he just attached them to his legs. And I think he was selling them at, like, I don't know, 70% off. But he had a bit of a business going on there.
Small saints.
We've spoken before, haven't we, about, the bag checks. Harrods have a clear bag policy where all the staff have to put their
Oh,
personal
yes.
items in clear bags.
Well, listen up here. This is one thing I have to say about that. If you paid your staff properly, they wouldn't have to actually shoplift and start selling it on the side. You know, like that's the truth of it. He was probably having to sell those because he probably wasn't making enough. I'm not condoning it in any
We're
sense.
not condoning,
And,
but it
and, and
speaks to the broader issues, doesn't it?
exactly. Yeah. And like, you know, I know both you and I would never, and I believe in karma too much to ever do that because I just know it come and
You
bite me in
stole
the
my
arse.
heart, Jasmine.
That was the only thing I stole. But I do think it's true, isn't it? If you're really struggling and that's an easy access, you're working in a store, you have access to stock that you know will sell. I mean,
I think predominantly if you're in a fashion store, it's opportunistic. It's wrong. It's very naughty. I can see the mental gymnastics, the mental process
yeah.
that gets somebody to that point. You know what's also really interesting is that labeling, Howard Becker's labeling theory that I spoke about. It also suggests, so now we're living, as I spoke about, we're living in a society now where we're assumed to be criminals. Where we go into a shop, we're assumed to be shoplifters, right? This theory suggests that being labeled that way as a society, as deviant, can actually lead to the amplification of that deviance. So you're like, well, if they already think that I'm a crook going into Sainsbury's, then
I might as well be one.
yeah. I mean, it's like that if we're all crooks, then what's the problem? You know,
Yeah.
if everybody's at it. So I think we need to be retailers need to be quite careful about, treating us as customers as crooks the moment we walk into the shop. Because I think inadvertently it's having the opposite impact that they were hoping for. It's not a deterrent. People are like, fuck it. If they think I'm a criminal, I'm going to be one.
I think it's rock and roll. They're like, hell yeah, get me in there. And they know they'll get, people know they'll get away with it because what they know a shop assistant or a sales associate's not going to risk their life to get it. They know it's easy pickings. But we know you would only bar the under fives, Tim. Those are the people who don't work. I mean, I found some funny stories because there are funny stories to it. There are obviously some very shocking moments, but there are
This
some.
is this is sounding like a very light episode. Our listeners are going to be like, what is Tim and Jasmine of full-time criminals?
Criminals. I mean, no, but I think that there are the serious moments, aren't there, when you have to deal with shit, and then there are things that you can't quite believe has just happened, like the old lady who will swap something out of her bag and take it away. There's that kind of shoplifting. I mean, we've had it where like a child will take something who's been asked by the parents to take the item, right? And then how do you police that? Like, do you go and like you go, oh, I think your child's gone and run out the store with a product, but you don't want to accuse anyone of anything. It's a really difficult line to.
Also, are we paid enough? I think often I've seen, you're going to get it in the neck. There's two people on the shop floor. There's no security. You've seen something be swiped. You're like, do you know what? I'm just not going to say anything. It's less grief if I just don't even report it to my manager.
If you'd what's it, seeing is believing.
I'm like, what bag? What are you talking about?
There was nothing. You gaslight them. There's nothing there this morning.
Sold it weeks ago.
Well, I found someone on Reddit who said, worked at Dunelm Mill as my first weekend job. Saw a
That's
few.
for our listeners. That's UK.
What is Dunelm Mill?
Dunelm is homeware, interior
Yes.
homeware, high streety homeware.
I didn't realise I had a mill. And it said, I saw a woman steal a vase by putting it literally under her boob. It was amazing how it swallowed it whole and you couldn't tell at all that it was there.
See, that ample bosom does pay off sometimes.
I mean, yeah, if that's a new technique, you've got
Swallowed
big
it whole.
I mean, how big do your boobs need to be?
How does a breast ingest something? God, I have to think.
And I definitely think that the people here were people on Reddit. As I was reading through some of these stories, there was that constant like reiteration of I'm not paid enough, I shouldn't care about this. Someone literally put, I wasn't going to say anything until the machine had an alert. To which he looked over and had the most nervous face of a grown man I've ever seen. And I asked, "Were you able to scan the avocado as if it was an accident?" Trying to already turn the blind eye. He pulled it out and did it properly. I don't
Where was the
care.
avocado? Under his breast.
Like, under something else
Up
with
his...
his other avocados. He said, "I don't care about shoplifting. They're the ones who get a misdemeanor for it. It only irks me when they make my job harder."
There you go. There you go. It was interesting because, I think historically, if we cast our mind back, just pre-COVID, pre this explosion in shoplifting, it was predominantly drug users that were stealing in shops. A 2018 report by the Center for Social Justice, I think, reported that 70% of all retail shoplifting were by people that had dependencies on heroin, crack cocaine, or other psychoactive substances.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so now with this kind of increase and obviously the decrease in budgets of things around mental health provision, drug intervention through the NHS, I mean, that's fueling it too, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, that's a really desperate situation as well. If you're addicted to something, you are going to do that because you could steal something of high value, and that's a lot of drugs then that provides you with it. It's not like these organized crimes we're saying. That's for a genuine self desperation. It's not like these people who are doing it for the thrill of it as a job. It's literally for
Yeah.
self-preservation at that point, isn't it?
Yeah, where's the next hit? It's pretty easy just to go into a shop and steal something, but it's kind of, what are the solutions, then with the lack of funding in these areas? That's the cost of living crisis will have pushed more people, particularly those in maybe early recovery, back into active addiction,
Oh yeah.
back into those shops, shoplifting.
But also homelessness. I mean, homelessness isn't getting any better. And
We've
especially
always, we are a nation of shopkeepers, but we've always been a nation of shoplifters too. Like you're saying, homelessness,
Oliver
poverty.
Twist vibes, that kind of like Fagin energy of like stealing from the rich, kind of Robin Hood type attitude, isn't it? For a lot of people, it's like that criminality, that there's that both sides of it.
It really does serve as a distraction as well, doesn't it? If you think about the reporting in the media, particularly the right-wing media, it's a distraction. Let's blame the people. Let's blame the pet plebs as a
Yeah,
diversionary tactic away from white-collar crime.
for sure. But I also think that what, like, back to your point of like people suffering drug addiction and going through homelessness, is there's a part of me that always thinks of like those wonderful shopkeepers who, when someone's sleeping rough outside their store, will make them breakfast and get them a drink. And
Coffee
it's,
every morning.
if we have these
Use the
automated
loo.
stores, yeah, exactly. If we have these automated stores, what's going to happen to those interactions in which people feel human? So often now I see poor people getting turfed out of shop fronts where they're
Yeah.
having to stay. I mean, and without any human interaction now, what's going to happen to that?
We're losing our humanity, is what you're saying. And,
Yeah.
the rise of automation is that every time I come back to this, the loss of community and this feeling that we're on our own. That's the perfect breeding ground for shoplifting. We're on our own, you know.
But it will be more intelligent now. I think we'll see an evolution of like, as things like Amazon Fresh come into the forefront and those methods of tracking and surveying people, there'll be other people, there'll be the people that will start to be them and be like internet thieves, the people that, I mean, I've had it, haven't I, where I've had someone phone up and order and I thought it was like happy days. Had a big order on the phone. Obviously I had no clue. They gave me their card details. I put the transaction through. They were obviously quite clever about how to scam someone using their card details, and they'd done it all that way. I never even met the person who was scamming me in the store, did I? And they put through big orders. That's how the crimes then will start to evolve. It will be less pickpocket-esque. It will be a lot more people having things that sort of stop like scanners, things that block scanners so that they can just walk out the store, things that sort of distract from cameras.
It's going to, the shift really fundamentally is to online, isn't it? It's to online petty criminality, credit card fraud, and then on larger scale too, big criminality, in ecom.
Yeah, easily.
Who I was really impressed by? Co-op's director of public affairs. He's called Paul Gerard. He said that stealing to provide for oneself has always happened, remarkably so for a country as rich as ours. But what's behind the 44% rise is not people stealing for themselves, but people stealing on a large scale to resell to people struggling to make ends meet. So this argument that it's criminal gangs, but what he is saying, it's very honest for someone from Co-op, is the cost of living crisis, directly or indirectly, is still the main culprit. And these kind of criminal gangs are just seizing the opportunity of people's desperation.
Yeah, and profiting off those because they get it for free. So the profit margin's wild for them because any money they make is free money.
Yeah. I think, in this kind of conversation, we've spoken about these big corporations, but I don't think we need to mention those small independents.
100%. Who this will break them, where having an expensive product taken is the difference between them being able to pay rent that month or not.
That inventory is costing small independent retailers that put their heart and soul into it. It's not just spreadsheets and numbers.
It's their own personal investment at the end of the day, especially if they're starting to get the business running. They will have put a lot of self-funded money into it.
And they're on a knife edge, if someone comes in and swipes a whole rail, as happened to me when I was working at Hunter on Regent Street. Someone just came and swiped the entire rail.
They were kicked out for any rainstorm.
I got a disciplinary letter in the post. I mean, it was wild.
I turned to my eye.
No, I pushed back. I was like, really?
Can't blame me.
Yeah, and then they rescinded it. But yeah, for an independent retailer, if a rack gets stolen, that it could be the last nail in the coffin.
And I think that's also why independent retailers will be hesitant to open. People who'd like to open a shop but can't afford staff are thinking, is it worth it if I'm stood in a shop and one day, and we've had this, and something that is a huge issue with small type stores is having only one sales associate on the store. Because if you have two people, it's still understaffed, but there's an element of safety in a pair. But the issue that you have with independent retailers is if something happens, like someone comes in with a weapon, or worse in London, it could be a bomb, could be anything. Like, how would you on earth contact anyone while you're in that store? A lot of stores don't have those panic alarms anymore or buttons that contact the police.
Well, are the police going to rock up if you press one of those?
You'd be pushing it like non-stop and no one would be there. It'd be 2 working days later when they rock up.
Yeah, I mean, I think working on your own in a shop, there is no justification. I mean, other than if it's your store and you own it and you're an independent retailer, there is no justification to be putting a member of staff at risk like that. But I think that kind of raises the important point, probably the last point of today, is that I think that now society have kind of clocked onto the fact, and shoplifters have clocked onto the fact, and retailers, that if you call the police and report, hi, I've just had a t-shirt stolen, I mean, they're not rocking up, are they? They'll give you a crime reference number over the phone, and that's the end you'll hear of it.
They're probably thinking they've got bigger fish to fry than your little t-shirt.
So I think, petty shoplifters and even these bigger operations are like, we're not trafficking drugs, we're shoplifting across country lines, and the police aren't going to act.
And if the police don't act, that just signals back that it's semi-okay.
Yeah.
That just signals back to everyone, oh, Well, if it's not that illegal, and the
Yeah,
police
it's
aren't worried.
I suppose it's a bit like NOS, laughing
Yes,
gas.
yeah, yeah.
So that has just been criminalised. I think now it's is it
I
C
think it's like class
category,
B.
B
Yeah,
category. But everyone's still selling it and doing it at Carnival. The police are obviously turning a blind eye. I think there were less than 20 arrests for NOS canister
I
criminality,
mean,
if that's what you call it.
at Carney, I saw someone with a smart whip next to a police officer. They're not
Yeah,
doing, they're
they're
obviously
not
not
going to
bothered.
act. And the same with shoplifting. Shoplifters know that the police, and that this isn't an attack on the police, is that they're so overstretched
Yeah,
that the shoplifter knows that nothing's going to come of this,
for sure.
and that's enabling this and it's fueling it as well, isn't it? I think it's very easy to keep pointing the finger of blame at us as a society, as sick society. But if law enforcement aren't acting, then it's just going to continue, isn't it?
Well, exactly. If it seems like across the board, and it is because of the economy we're living in, as costs get cut
Yeah.
in all sectors, there will be a ripple effect.
Yeah, I was in 2010. It was Theresa May that bowed to Treasury demands to cut police budgets, you know? And then over the next 5 years, we saw policing go from around 144,000 to about 122,000. There were less police on the streets. Yes, it has recovered. I think we're up to about 150. But in the last 12 months, again, we've seen a drop in, I think, about 500 less police officers. So also, is it a profession that people want to go into? With this episode that we've spoken about for an hour, basically out of control shoplifting.
And crime in general, do you know what I mean? It's like shop assistants, the abuse people are getting. I'm sure as policemen, it's on another level. Like, who wants to do that job? Not me.
But on a lighter final note, Jasmine, we've spoken about this for an hour, but it is the few and far between, isn't it? Most people that come into the shop are lovely and they work hard and they
For
save up
sure.
and they buy something that they've wanted for a long time. They're not going to think, I'm going to bypass this 6 months of savings and put it in my bag for life, are they?
No, especially not having spoke to us for a good 20 minutes.
So kids, Jasmine and I at the shop floor do not condone shoplifting.
And we'll catch you. I mean, we're eyes all over when you and I are together, aren't we?
We've got beady little shrew eyes.
Eyes at the back of our heads.
You've got beady little shrew eyes.
And I wouldn't mess with Tim.
Our final point for the day is that the shop floor tote bag, Jasmine. Tell our listeners.
So please don't start using this for shoplifting. This is not the product collab that we've decided.
The new shop floor foil-lined tote bag could be yours.
So we are going to do some merch, aren't we, Timothy?
We are, and our first product is going to be the shop floor tote.
I have to say they're really nice, and we want something that people can use, take to work, is durable. Not some of those flimsy university quality and only go to an open day at uni. None of that rubbish.
It truly is a bag for life. Well, that's the plan. So we would love to hear your comments as to whether you would purchase a shop floor tote.
Yeah, to rock up to your everyday retail job.
To rock up to that disciplinary meeting that we mentioned last week. But those are going ahead. So we're going to do a little poll on Spotify to kind of gauge
interest,
demand, and then we'll know how many to print. So let us know.
And then we also want to hear from you guys. We want to see photographs with you wearing your bag on your way to the store, outside the store, in the staff room,
on the tube, on the bus.
You are our models. You are our models. So we expect the hottest pics.
I can't wait. That's going to be so exciting to see the shop floor tote bags across the UK. Look at me getting ahead of myself. We'll have one sale and it'll be from my mum in York, feeling very
It'll be our
sorry for
friends
us.
who, felt bad and like got it at mates rates or something.
All right, Jasmine, lots of love and see you next week, everyone.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.